Hello everybody, it's 2021 and I decided to offer a free training session to teach Salesforce flows. In this first episode of Learn Salesforce Flows, I started off with a very simple screen flow and I continued building functionality on top of that flow where I added a get and update element. I eventually removed the screen elements and converted and saved the flow as an auto launch flow. After that, I saved the flow as a record triggered flow and demonstrated the before save and after save functionality. So this 90-minute video where 53 people participated live became a very nice tour of the most popular Salesforce flow types and their functionality. Enjoy the session. Hello everybody, thanks for joining me at this late hour. Let me just turn on chat. We are already 20 people. This is Andy. I'm gonna wait a few more minutes. Hey Christian. I'm gonna wait a few more minutes for a few more people to join. We have close to 80 people who registered, which is incredible. I don't expect for everybody to be able to join at this point, but you will always have access to the recording. Do I sound okay? Is the picture all right? If you could give me feedback in the chat window, that would be very good. All right. Now, we are already 28 people. Okay, let me first give you a little bit of information on the platform. We are using this platform called SuperPeer. It's a brand new startup based out of Silicon Valley. And what they want to do is they want to enable influencers. I don't consider myself an influencer. I have connections to the startup and they gave me a beta user, which is free. They enable people to be able to do one-to-one meetings, video conferences, and also webcasts. These can be paid or free. And I'm planning on doing a 6-week-long class on here, focusing on Salesforce flow functionality. And these classes are going to be about 1.5 hours. It depends on how fast we can go. To be honest with you, I'm not sure as well. But a couple of things to know: the live streaming functionality on SuperPeer is still in beta, so we could have a few minor glitches. I'm really grateful that we are able to use this platform for free, which is great. Now, you can use the chat window to ask questions. You can respond to each other, answer questions. And just so you know, the recording will be made available to you on this platform. When you go back, you can just directly play and watch it. And I'm planning on also uploading it to the YouTube channel. And I have also the ability to include a couple of people in the live webcast. So if you have a question, you can come on the broadcast and ask it yourself verbally, or including also your picture, video. That could make things a little bit more interesting because it gets a little bit boring to speak by yourself for 1 or 1.5 hours. Now, I provided the link for my YouTube channel. I have a couple of videos over there for a couple of use cases that are a little bit more advanced. And I'm going to also provide my Twitter handle, just in case if I lose picture or sound or something is not right, and I'm not following the chat window at that point, go ahead and tweet or direct DM me so that I can find out that I need to make a correction. So we are about 39 people now. we can get started. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Andy. I am the founder of BRD Pro Consulting in Jacksonville, Florida. And I've been focusing on the Salesforce platform as a consultant for the last 3 years. I worked as an operational person and as a business executive for a long time, about 20 years. And then I made a career change and I moved to Jacksonville, Florida. Now I'm focusing on Salesforce. And I was able to deliver a couple of projects, a couple of quite sophisticated projects on mainly on Flow for the last few years. I don't really have a lot of history on process and workflows. That was actually my chance. I was able to come on to Flows really fresh and learn everything on Flows and improve myself. And I really love Flows, actually. So if you have questions about what workflow can be, how workflows can be translated to flows, or how processes can be translated to flows, I may not be the perfect person to ask those questions because, like I said, I started on flows directly. Now, a couple of items to know. I'm going to check the chat window as much as, yes, this is recorded and the recording will be made available both on this platform, and I'm also planning on putting it on YouTube. So a couple of things about the broadcast itself. Like I said, I'm going to be checking the chat window intermittently because I'm by myself. It's going to be difficult for me to check all the questions constantly. So I'll go back and forth. So please be patient. Another important thing is I'm sure there are beginners and more advanced people on the webcast. So I prepared a very interesting example for us to work on that's going to start with screen flows, and we're going to switch to auto launch flows, and then we're going to do record triggered flows. All these are going to be built and developed on the same use case. So if you think you are more advanced and the beginning is going to be a little bit trivial for you, please be patient. We are going to finish up, if the time allows, with record triggered flows. And also, there are a lot of little tips and tricks that could be important for you that we are going to mention as we go along. If you can think of things, if you think I'm making a mistake, please go ahead and put it in the chat window. I'm sure we could run into errors as well building the flows. Now, I'm not going to be using any PowerPoint presentations. This is going to be just live coding, kind of live low coding, let's say. So, and if you are planning on following and building the flows with me, go ahead and get started. If you have 2 monitors, it's going to work best. If you lose me at any point, don't worry about it because I'm going to make the recording available so you can actually go back to it later. Please give me feedback about speed, whether you understand me well, the sound and the picture. Let's go ahead and get started. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to try and use my second window for my chat. Let's see. Share the screen. Okay, first check. Do you see my Salesforce screen? I guess you see my Salesforce screen, so I'm going to get started. Hi, Yancy. Hi, Rick, Will, everybody I know. Thanks for coming along. Now we are 45 people. I mean, I'm so grateful. I wasn't expecting numbers like this. Thank you so much for joining. Now, what I'm going to do is, to get started, as you know, Flow is a tool on the Salesforce platform for automation. So we are able to do several steps, and we are able to trigger those steps based on events that are happening within Salesforce. But the original, I think the original purpose of flows was to create screen dialogues for example, customer service agents, right? So there are use cases where you want to present some information to your agents so that they can communicate those online or they can communicate those on the phone to your customers. Now, I'm going to get started with a very simple screen flow. If you are new to flows, this screen could be overwhelming for you. It's important that you make the right decision to get your flow started. And if you are brand new to flows, I'm going to strongly encourage you to start with screen flows. The reason for that being, it's actually the type of flow where you can create screen dialogues. So it's much easier for you to ask for information on the screen and then present an information as a response on the screen if you're not yet familiar very well with the debug logs. Screen flows are by far the easiest to debug, and then auto launch flows come obviously next. So the main difference between these two, screen flows have screen dialog capability, and the Salesforce screen a little bigger. Okay, let me try. Is this better? Yeah, the screen resolution is a little bit of a problem. I tried another live cast today, and unfortunately, some of the detail gets lost, I think, in resolution. Okay, now let's go back. Like I said, the screen flows allow screen dialog. Auto launch flows completely run in the background. So you can launch an auto launch flow. It'll do some operations and update some field values in the background, but you're not going to see anything. You're just going to see the outcome presented on your records. Now let's start with a simple screen flow, and I'm going to choose the auto layout option. This is fairly new, as you know. We used to do freeform. Now the auto layout option does the layout for us. Now I want to do a use case where I want to create a screen. Let's call this one loan screen. And on this screen, I'm going to ask the user the full name of the customer. This is how we add components to our text screen component. I mean, not text screen component. Let's call this full name. And then let's ask the agent, let's say, or the employee who's using the screen, what the loan amount is. And what the loan term in months is going to be. So these are our input parameters. Let me just go ahead and turn off the header. In my control navigation, I'm going to turn off pause. And this is our input screen. That's how our flow starts. Now, after we get this information, what I want to do is I want to present on screen the monthly payment amount for this customer, for this client, which is a simple calculation of loan amount divided by loan term in months. So for that, I want to create a new resource on the left side. And this is going to be a formula. And let's call this monthly payment formula. And this is going to be of type number. And to construct the formula, we can use the insert a resource window and then start typing to look for whatever screen component we want to include. So we want to include loan amount, and loan amount is going to be divided by loan term in months. So this calculation is going to yield monthly payment amount. Now I want to turn around and present that information back to the employee or the user. Let's call this one output screen. And let's go ahead and hide the header and turn off pause. And what we want to do here is we want to display text this time, and we can construct our text consisting of static information and also variables and formula output values. So what we can say here is, dear, I want to include the full name, actually it makes more sense to think of this at this point an input screen and an output screen directly to the customer. So dear customer, dear full name, your loan of, let's say, loan amount and term will generate, let's say, generate monthly payments of and then here we need to use the formula output. That should give us what we need. Let's see if that works. Now, before we run it, we need to save it. Somebody is asking, Chris is asking, are you using Winter 21 or Spring 21? This is just a good question. This is just a regular developer instance that I've opened a long time ago. So I think this is probably the current version. We'll just check that now. While we're saving, we'll see the logo, Chris. I don't remember, to be honest with you. But I didn't plan on using anything from the new release that's not generally available yet. So now we need to save first. Let's call this one loan calculation flow. API name is generated. You know, there are advanced options here that we don't need at this point. So we save the version of this flow. Let's debug this one. See, we didn't really get an error message so far. So I'm going to say, and the outcome is my full name, loan amount is $12,000, and then this over 12 months. Next. Here, and the outcome, your loan of $12,000 and term 12. Well, the grammar is horrible, but you know, you get the idea. Will generate monthly payments of $1,000, right? So this is what we wanted to do, what we wanted to achieve. Now, it's important to note that on the debug screen over here, we're able to see what's happening. Now, let's run this one again. It started Chris, to answer your question, the API version for the flow at least is 50. That we know. It's noted here. Loan amount 12,000. This is important. Now, as I click next, you will see over here that a screen ran, and the screen is titled loan screen, and then there was a text box of full name, and the value at runtime is Endyakan, and then you can see all the input, and then here you see the output. When you click on finish, you'll see also on this side the output presented in your debug log. But right now, pretty much everything is happening on the input and output screens. I mean, if we had a problem, we'd probably see also on screen as well. Now, we saved one version of this. Let's try and build on top of this, right? What else can we do? How can we make this more intelligent? Now, we are asking the person what their name is. That doesn't make too much sense, because we are a CRM system, right, in the end. So let me just go here and find a contact. Diana Prince is actually on my instance. I use Marvel names quite a lot in my testing. So this is a contact that exists on my system that I want to use to pull the full name. And as most of you know, this is the unique ID for the contact record that I can use to test on my flow. Now, we saved already version 1. Let's go ahead and save a version 2, a new version, and then start changing on that one. What we want to do here is we want to get a contact and then use the contact name in our output instead of asking for the full name. So before we get the contact, because I want to ask for the contact ID, I want to create a variable called contact ID here. And when I create a variable, when I'm creating a variable for IDs, I need to use text. And what I can do in my flows is I can mark this variable available for input. What is that going to give me when I debug or run my flow? My flow is going to ask me what the contact ID is that I want to use in my flow. So I haven't built that logic yet, so let me go back. Let me use a get element here, get contact. And what do I want to get? Contact, the object type. And I want this condition to be met, which is ID equals the contact ID value that I'm going to be feeding to my flow. And in real life, I can do this in several ways. I mean, when I plug this flow into my instance, I can feed this flow with the contact ID. Now, in this case, it shouldn't matter, but when you want to just get one record, you should go into the habit of sorting by a unique field and then getting only the first record. That's a good way of avoiding unpredictable behavior. So now I got my contact. I forgot one thing. I want to actually get the value of the full name. So I'm going to look up the full name from this contact that I found and then assign this to a variable. I could have created my variable on the left side here beforehand, or I can just create my variable right here to say contact, let's call this full name variable. Naming conventions are important. I'm not very strict on that, but you should have yourself something that works. And here I appended a variable, var for variable. And this one is not going to be inputted or outputted, so I can just finish this dialog and say, okay, well, the full name is going to be assigned to the full name variable here. Now, another thing that's very important is if you want to make sure that your flow finds a record and it doesn't cause a problem later, it doesn't cause an error, you want to pick this checkbox right here and say, when no records are returned, set specified variables to null. So what's going to happen here is if no contacts can be found as a result of this get element, the full name variable is going to be assigned the value null. So now our input screen is here. Now we don't really need this anymore. I can't delete it yet because it's used in my output text. Let me just change that. Let's add the word months here. Oops, my Grammarly is intervening. Months will generate monthly payment. Okay, now this full name is coming from the screen. It's a screen element. So I want to change this one and use the full name variable instead. Once I do that, now I should be able to also delete this screen element because I don't need it anymore, and save this. Let's save this and see if we end up with any errors. We didn't. We can debug. As you remember, I already copied the unique ID for Diana Prince, and I'm going to paste that here. I'm going to enter same amount, 12,012 months, and now I can see that the name is coming from the contact. I can see that the unique contact ID is fed into the flow. The get step is finding the contact and assigning Diana Prince value to the variable. And I'm using that variable to present that information on the screen. Any questions so far? All right, I'm going to keep building further functionality into the flow. Now, another important step, whenever using get, what you want to do is you want to, as I just mentioned, you want to introduce a decision element into your flow right after get to check whether this variable here, the full name variable, is null or not, so that you won't end up with errors. Now, in this example, as long as I feed valid unique contact ID, I'm not going to be in trouble. But let's say I failed and I put something here that's not a unique contact ID. What's going to happen is I'm going to end up with an error. And the error, if you don't handle them in flows, they are quite ugly. The user is presented either with no information or with some gibberish, and you don't want to end up in that situation. So what you want to do is you want to introduce a decision here to say, is full name null? And the first one is going to be yes, null. First outcome is going to be null. And that will check whether the full name variable operator is null, is true. And if this is not the case, the default outcome is going to be executed. Usually, I always change the name of the default outcome. You don't have to, but I think it makes very much sense to change this so that you see the explanation on your branches. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you do your operation under the not null branch. And yes, null branch is supposed to either not do anything, end up in a stop, or present an error message that's readable to your users. So I don't actually know whether I can change this here in the auto layout format. So I'm going to momentarily go back to the classic format, and I'm going to say, okay, well, this is the not null branch. I want to go down that way, and I don't want to do anything if this the full name is null. So let's save and then go back to auto layout again. Yeah, this makes more sense. So in this case, let's debug this one and see. Contact ID is A, run. Tried to look up records, it couldn't find the records. It still ended up in an error message. Let me just see. Name assigned to full name. Just it doesn't actually get to the decision step. That's odd. It's not true. Let me just see. Run. Failed to find the record. Yeah. So in this example, this actually didn't turn out to be a good error handling situation because it actually doesn't get there at all. So if it doesn't find one contact, it just comes back with an error message, which is odd. It shouldn't do that. But anyway, so I will have to go back to that and then check. Do you suggest flow beginners use auto layout? I think so. I'm not, Chris, I'm not exactly 100% sure because I haven't started with it. For me, it's a little bit odd after getting started over here. So when we turn this off, just so you know, if you don't use auto layout, then your new elements are all here. So you drag your new elements, the screen elements, from here to here. That's how it works. I mean, it works a little bit differently. But I mean, I think probably it's a good way of getting started. I'm not exactly sure. All right, let's continue with this. The error handling didn't work very well, but we'll go back to that either today or some other day. Let's improve this use case a little bit further. What else can we do? We can actually go back. We can actually get these values from the contact record instead of asking the user or the customer these values. If we recorded these on the contact, then we can use that information. So for that, what I have done here already, which you can do, you can go to your, actually I can do that here. Let me go to the object manager over here. I have created on the contact 3 custom fields. You can do the same if you want to follow along. And what these are: loan amount, loan payment amount, and loan term in months. So it's the same information that we are working with, that we ask the user or the customer, the client, to enter on the screen. We are going to retrieve from the record, and we are going to update on the record. So I use number 9 digits with 2 decimals for loan amount and loan payment amount. And for loan term, I used a 3-digit number. So those are on the contact object right now. So to build on my flow further, what I can do is let's again create another version. I can get that information now from the contact record. So loan amount is going to be, let me create a new resource variable here, loan amount variable. So it's a number with 2 decimals. And loan term. Which is again going to be a number with 2 decimals. Oh no, loan term didn't need decimals. So we can actually change that right here. Loan term variable is right here. Let's change this to 0. So this information is going to be retrieved now from the contact record, and on my output screen I need to use loan amount that comes from the contact record. So this can be deleted right here. I need to use loan amount variable instead. This is the value that comes from the contact record. And loan term, this was the screen value. Now, this is going to also change to loan term variable value that comes from the contact record. Now our formula is not going to work either. We need to modify our formula. For that, we need to go here and change the input values of the formula. Loan amount variable divided by loan term variable. Okay, so as soon as I do that, my input screen elements will be available for me to delete, I think, because they are not being used anymore. Let me just delete one by one to make sure. Yes, which also means I can delete the whole screen element. I don't need an input screen anymore. Oh, okay, let me just see the comments. You don't need to put the full ID in there to debug. Oh, where do you access the end element? Well, there is no end element. The end element actually is automatically generated. So I don't plug in an end element. Can you explain the purpose of when to check the box for the input and output when creating a variable? Okay, that's a very good question. Let me just go back to that. Let me just finish this one right here. Save. Where was I? All right, now we what have we done? Now we have the get element. Get element is getting the full name and also the loan amount and loan term. Now I'm checking for errors which doesn't seem to work very well, so I need to go back to that, but that's fine. Let's ignore that. So I don't have an input screen anymore. I deleted the input screen. I present the output to the user that uses all the input I get from the record, and then I end it. Now let's go back to the question. Can you explain the purpose of when to check the box for input and output? Now, if I create a variable on this left panel, oops, I'm sorry, I hit the microphone. Hopefully I didn't make you all deaf. Now, if I check here a variable available for input, all the variables I check here available for input are going to be presented to me as soon as I hit run or debug as input variables here. So let's say I marked loan amount also as an input variable, then I'm going to have two boxes here, input boxes, for contact, one for contact ID, the other one for loan amount. Now in debug, I need to enter that manually. If I do this in my instance, and if I want to run a flow via other methods, there are other methods where I can pass that information into my flow to be used in the calculation. But here, for our purposes, we are just pasting the contact ID. If I uncheck that input, it's never going to ask me to enter the contact ID over here. But because we are not running this flow on a particular contact and passing the information via another method to the flow, we need this right now. So once I run this, I get your loan of, and terms will generate monthly payments of $, whatever. Why is that? Because my flow found the contact, got even the information for Diana Prince, the full name, but the loan term and loan amount were both null. They didn't have any value. So to be able to test that, I need to go back to my contact record. I need to enter data that I can use. Let's enter the same one, $12,000 loan amount. Loan term is 12 months, and save it. Now I have the necessary input values already assigned to the contact that I want to use in my flow. I can go back to my flow and debug again and pass the contact ID into my flow. And then I'm going to see now the output makes sense. Your loan of $12,000 in term of 12 months will generate monthly payments of $1,000. So let me ask you a question then. How can I make sure that I don't end up with that previous screen where the null values created complete nonsense on my screen? What do I need to do not to end up with that screen? Can you please put it in the chat window? Let's see. No answers. Let me check my Twitter. Oh, I have no warnings on Twitter. I think we have a response on the screen. Let me just refresh my chat. Could you add input decision checks for looking for null? Yes, decision to check for those values being null. Exactly, decision. Perfect answers. So what I would do here, I'm not going to go into that now. I will use this same decision right here to check whether those values are null or not, and then present a completely different information over there. I can actually add here conditions to say, well, is the loan amount null? Is the term null? And then I can customize here whether this decision output is going to be looking for all those conditions to be true, or are they going to be bound with an or logical element? We are going to go into decision elements later. I mean, that's a deep topic. So we have done that. How else can we improve this flow now? Why are we presenting all that information on the screen when I have already created here a field called loan payment amount? I don't really have to. Well, I can present it on the screen, but I should also update that information on the record itself. So let's do that. Let's leave the output screen intact, but let's add also how is the speed right now, the pace? Can you follow? Is it good, faster, slower? You go ahead and give me feedback, please, as I'm doing this right now. So what I want to do is update the contact record. And I want to update the contact object record, and the ID needs to be equal to the contact ID that I used before. My contact ID variable is holding the same information, nothing changed. And I want to take my formula output. What was that? Well, oh, I'm sorry. This is the field. This is the field on the contact, which is the loan payment amount, is going to be assigned the formula output that I have used on my screen, which is the monthly payment formula. Done. So save this one. So the pacing is good. All right, thank you. Now I have an update element which should update the contact at the same time. Let's debug this again. This time, what I'm looking for is going to be on the debug log on the right side, because yes, I'm presented with the same information here. Nothing changed there because I haven't changed anything there. But as soon as I hit next, my flow should go and update the contact record with the same contact ID that I have provided as an input. And then make the monthly payment formula $1,000. Let's go back and check. Well, we need to F5 for refresh my screen. Yes, it's winter 21, Chris. And as I go onto the record, I see that my loan payment amount is $1,000. So it's updated on the record itself. Now, do I really need an output screen anymore? No, I don't. I mean, so I can go back and save this one again, version it again. And let's get rid of the output screen. Can we delete it directly? Yes. So now what's going to happen is it's not going to present any information to me. It's not asking for any information from me. There is no input screen. There are no screen elements on here anymore. And it's not going to present any output information to me. It's just going to work with the record. Let's test that. To be able to test that and see the difference, let's change the numbers a little bit. $24,000 in 12 months. Let's keep that in 12 months. I'm going to delete that right here. So, and I'm going to go to my flow and debug again. Is this version 6? I got confused now. Wait here. Yes. This should be the right version. Let me just close these tabs. Do you also end up with 1 million tabs, or are you quite disciplined about this? I'm terrible. All right, run. As you can see, I wasn't presented with any screens, but on the debug log, I can see that $24,000 in 12 months and Diana Prince field values have been pulled from the contact. And here, $2,000 have been calculated and updated on the record. So I just need to refresh my screen again and see 2,000 right here. Worked very well. No problem so far. Okay. Now, why did I do all that? I wanted to actually provide a nice transition into an auto-launched flow. Now, this flow started as a screen flow, and it still is a screen flow. If you go here, and you go to Show Advanced, you see that this is a screen flow. Now, there is a nice feature and functionality in Salesforce that you can use as you are building your flows and you are building your skills. You can start something as a screen flow and then use the Save As functionality to change it to a auto-launch flow if there is no screen dialog. So I'm going to say, well, this time I'm not going to version in my Save As dialog. I'm going to say, I want to create a new flow. I'm going to use loan calculation auto-launched flow name. Now I'm going to go into Show Advanced and change the screen flow to an auto-launch flow, no trigger, and save this one. So now I ended up with loan calculation auto-launch flow version 1. So this flow now is an auto-launch flow that I can call from anywhere within Salesforce. I can trigger. A process builder even can trigger this one and pass the record ID to the flow. And this is going to process all that calculation and update the record itself. So I can run this one, debug this one again. It's going to ask me the contact information. Let's change this one, make it $48,000. Delete this. Let me close this screen, okay. Use the same contact ID. It updated $4,000 on the contact. I mean, the logic didn't change, just the type of flow has changed. And the type of flow actually dictates kind of where and how you can use that flow. So you cannot use screen flows in some areas, and you cannot use auto-launch flow in some other areas. So that's why it's important. So now we have an auto-launch flow that we can use and trigger in many areas. Yes, very many tabs in a day. I completely forget. Just keeps adding. So we talked about screen flows. We talked about auto-launch flows. What else is there? Now we haven't covered, let me just show you the new flow dialog again. We haven't really covered the record triggered flows. And the record triggered flows are two different types. There is the before save flow and after save flow. This is a deeper topic, but I want to also show you the transition to the record trigger flow so that you understand how and when it's used. Now, the concept of record trigger flow is this. Whenever a record is created or updated, and we can actually choose whether we want to run it when it's updated, or created, or in both cases, we are going to perform some actions, and those actions usually end up in updating some fields on the record itself. Or if it's an after save flow, then we can also create new related records or update some of the related records. So we can again transition. These are by far the hardest to debug because they don't really present a debug log. You kind of need to do them right. If you end up in trouble or you have error messages, it's very hard to debug them. You need to kind of. I recommend for you to build this one as an auto launch flow, and then screen flow or an auto launch flow, and then save as a record triggered flow. Now, this can easily be, this auto launch flow can easily be a before save record triggered flow, because whenever I go to the contact and then I update these two fields, the flow can check whether these fields are updated and go ahead and output this information and save the value in loan payment amount. So let's do that. I'm going to again save this one as a new flow. Loan calculation, I'm going to call it record triggered flow. And go into advanced and change the auto launch flow to record triggered. Saving it. Now it's going to give me some error messages because record triggered flows work completely in a different way. And there are many changes that I need to make to this flow. Let's go ahead and simplify. We don't really need this decision step anymore. Oops, it just deleted everything. If you ever do that, then go ahead and back out and don't save your changes. Let's go back to this. That's one of the difficulties of the auto layout. Okay, the question here, I have a question in the chat window. When would you use an auto launch flow, no triggers? What is the purpose? Very good question. You would use an auto launch flow, for example, to be launched from a button on the record. In this, it is very debatable whether it makes sense in this use case, but look, I could actually create a button here, present a button over here that runs that flow. So if I don't want this value to be updated every time, if I don't want the loan payment amount to be recalculated automatically, but I want actually the, let's say the loan expert to manually make that calculation based on the flow I generated. When I say manually trigger that calculation, then I can present a button here, and then it'll say calculate loan amount, monthly loan amount, and as soon as they press this button, this value is going to be calculated. Okay, so let's go back to our record triggered flow. We need some, wait, oh, okay, now I remember. I actually messed up that flow and I need to go back and go back to the previous version. Let me refresh the screen. Okay, it's right here. There's only one version, so I can just click here to go to that version. Okay, so this is Well, no. This is my work that I have created in preparation before today. Loan calculation, auto launch flow, loan calculation flow. I don't think we were able to save that one. I guess we just created and then we weren't able to save it. Last modified, sort by last modified. Loan calculation, auto launch, loan calculation. There is no before save. It doesn't matter. Let's go here. Well, if you work a lot with flows, just one tip. Get into the habit of not clicking here to go into your flows. Just going right here to see all the versions that are available. In our case, we have only one version. If you don't do that, you're going to end up with the active version or with the last version. But in some cases, you might want to go to a previous version. So there are sometimes 20, 30, 40 versions of one flow. So, it makes sense to go into the list view. Let me just do the save as again over here. Record triggered. Save it as a new flow and make it a record triggered flow. Save. I have the error message. I'm going to get out from auto layout completely here because this is going to mess me up. Okay. Now delete this one. Connect these two together. Now there is one thing about before save flows. Now let's go ahead and work on our start element. The start element in record triggered flows, the start element is very important. Now, I want to run and trigger this flow whenever a record is created or updated and before the record is saved. Now, how do I make that decision? When do I use the before save? When do I use the after save? Now, it could be more complicated, but as a general rule, if you are working on the same record and you are going to update the same record, then before save is going to be sufficient for you, is going to be good for you. Whenever you need to create a related record, whenever you need to update a related record, let's say you're working on a contact and you need to create a task. You're working on an account and you need to create a contact or update a contact. In that case, you have to use the after save flow because you need the unique ID of the record that is going to be created possibly in this instance. What I mean by that is this. Because I marked this one as a record is created or updated, which is going to apply to the object contact that I choose here. This is going to be triggered also when I create a new contact. So I can define conditions, but for the sake of argument, I'm just going to say no conditions for now. So what this says here is whenever a new contact is created or a contact is updated, go ahead and launch and trigger this flow, right? So if I create a new contact, this flow is going to run before the values that I provide as a user are committed to the database and a record is created. So in other words, I'm going to modify the values that the user provides, calculate new values based off of those values, and update the information on the record before the record is committed to the database, which also means because I'm doing all this operation before the commitment to the database, the if this is a new record, the record doesn't have a unique ID yet. If the record doesn't have a unique ID, I cannot do operations on the related records. I cannot create a related record using that unique ID. I cannot update a related record. Anyway, this can get a little bit complicated. Let me just move on a little bit. So in this example, what I want to do though is to be efficient. I don't want to run this flow every time a contact is updated. I want to provide final conditions. So I'm going to say I want to run this flow only when loan amount on the contact record is not null. And not only that, I want to also check whether the loan term is null, false. So for this flow to run, both loan amount, the end in between is important, both loan amount and loan term months have to be not null. So we have to have numbers in those fields for this to run. If we cannot satisfy this condition, this flow is never going to run. It's going to evaluate this right at the beginning, and then it's not going to do any of the other steps. And there is also another option over here, which we are not going to worry about now. Let's leave that default. So this flow is going to be run. Now, we don't really need to use get anymore in before save. What we can do is we can actually use in our monthly payment formula the loan amount and the loan term values directly off of the record that we are using. The contact record that triggers and starts this flow, and all the values of that record is provided for me right under $record contact list over here. So when I go into this $record and then use the loan amount off of that $record loan amount, this is the exact value that the user entered on the screen for the loan amount into the contact record. And then again, I can search for record, $record loan term is the value that's pulling from the contact record that I can use. Now, because this is a before save and everything is happening before the data is committed to the database, I don't really need to use an update step either. I can do direct assignment. So new resource. Now this time new element. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say assign loan amount on monthly payment amount. And what this is going to do is it is going to, again, take that $record. This is the contact record that I'm working on, and take the loan payment amount field, and that field is going to be assigned the value of the formula. So once I do that assignment, so what have I done here? I've taken the two values from the record that triggered the before save flow, loan amount and loan term months. I divided them to calculate the monthly payment. And I assigned this value to, again, dollar record loan payment amount that exists on the contact record that's just about to be created or updated, right? So once I do that and save this, let's make sure this is a record trigger flow, save. Now, like I said, there is no way to debug this. You know what? We have actually still a contact ID here that's marked as an input variable. So we need to delete this one. We don't use this anymore. There is no way to debug this. Once I run this, I'm just going to see some gibberish here. I just need to activate and test it. Let me go ahead and activate. Let me do this first. You see this over here, the Diana Prince account, the Diana Prince contact. Now, when I update this information over here, change it, let's say, to 48 months, and save, nothing is calculated here, as you can see. Let me refresh my screen just to make sure. There is no automation that's running. No active automation is calculating my loan payment amount. Now, if I go back to my flow, where am I? Okay, right here. And then activate this flow. Now my flow is active. And I update this again. I don't need to update the numbers. 48,048 and save it. It is going to calculate automatically the loan payment amount and update it on the record and display it back to me. The reason why I can see this value immediately is because this is a before save flow. In before save flows, you don't need to refresh your screen. The information is calculated and updated, committed to the database, and then that information gets back to you and presented on your screen. So you don't need to refresh it. If you use an after save flow, then you are going to need to refresh your screen to be able to see that information. I hope I didn't confuse you and lose you completely. But I mean, it's totally okay if you do not understand this the first time you see it. It's a little bit complicated topic. Okay, now let me go back to my chat window. Can we choose multiple triggers? Yasemin, what does that exactly mean? Can you please ask me a follow-up question? To confirm, because you are using a before save option, you no longer require the update module and replaced it with assign, which is essentially a kind of update module. Okay, so this is an important point. This is an important point, Robert. Now, we are working with a record that's just about to be created. The record is not in the database yet. The elements of get and update refer to operations that touch the database. In fact, they are DML operations. So, you know, they go to the database, they retrieve information, or they go to the database, they update information on the database. Now, in our case, because we are working with record values that have not hit the database yet, they have not been committed to the database, we cannot use get or update. We need to use assign, and assign is actually a simple operation. Think of it as a simple math operation where, you know, you are assigning a number to a variable. You are assigning text to a string. So as soon as you do that assignment, and then you let Salesforce continue with its operation of commit, it's going to commit the value that you have calculated and assigned to the database. That's why we need to use assign. In another type of flow, we only use assign to, for example, we would use assign to create a counter variable and add a number to it. We would assign 0 to it or 1 to it initially, and then every time we go through the loop, we will add another one, so it will show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's what usually assign is used. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes. Like I said, it's totally okay if you are new to this, if you got lost a little bit. Let me just show you one more thing so that you get the idea. Now, we have done the before save operation. That's done. Let me deactivate this one. It's important because if I don't deactivate, it's going to mess up our next step. Let's say I want to take my auto-launched flow and I want to create an after-save flow. Why would I want to create an after-save flow? I would only want to create an after-save flow in this kind of use case. Like I mentioned before, if I wanted to create a related record. Let's say I want to update that number, the monthly payment value, and at the same time create a task for one of the employees to send out the payment schedule to the client. So in that case, what I would have to do is, let's take our loan calculation auto launch flow again. Save as a new flow. This is again a record triggered flow, but this is going to be an after save example. So let me just use this name and convention. I'm going to again change it to a record triggered flow. Save it. Get out of auto layout. Save this one again, just to make sure that I'm saving. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to run this flow when a record is created and updated, but this time after the record is saved. So when I do an after save operation, I can still use the $record values to do my operations, but this time, instead of assignment, I really need to use update element to be able to update that information. So here I was getting the loan amount and full name and whatever. I don't need to do any of that anymore because that information is available to me. I can delete this one. So again, what I need to do is take my monthly payment formula. Maybe we should have started with the before save example, could have been easier. Wait a minute. Oh, I need to choose my object. I need to work on my start element again. Contact, loan amount is not false. Loan term is not false. This is the same exact logic we used last time. After save, all that is fine and dandy. Now I can edit my formula here, and now I have dollar record presented to me. Loan amount divided by dollar record loan term months. So this time, like I said, because it's after save, I need to use the update step. I don't need to use contact ID. I can use again the dollar record ID. So I'm saying update the contact that I'm working on with the monthly payment formula and assign this monthly payment formula to loan payment amount. This is all fine and dandy. This should work. This time after save, not before save. Before save is always faster and more efficient if you can work with the before save. But in our case, we said we are going to also create a task. That's why we want to work with after save. So for that, I need to take an element from here to create a record. Create task. 1. Use separate values. Create a task. And let's assign as the who ID, the record ID, which is the contact. So we need to associate the contact with the task. Owner should be whoever ran the flow, user ID. And then subject should say send payment plan to customer. And then we can also use the activity date from the flow, current date. Done. So what we are doing is we are updating the same information on the record, and this time we are creating also a task. Let's save this one, no errors, activate, and let's see if that works. Go back to Diana Prince. Let's delete this one. And let's change this one. 12,000 again, and 12, and save. Now, as soon as I save this one, it actually updated, which is interesting. I thought I would have to refresh the screen to be able to see this value, but it worked without problem. And look, voila, on the right side, we have actually a task that says send payment plan to customer. The due date is today, and it is assigned to me, the user who ran the flow, and it is associated with the contact, Diana Prince. Voila, guys. So this is the after save flow. The after save flow is used whenever you have to create a record or update a record that's associated with the record that triggered the flow. All right, any questions? We still have 26 people. That's amazing. Thanks for following, folks. Did anybody fall asleep? Where did the activity date go to? Well, the activity date is actually the due date here. Right? Or am I mistaken? Is the activity date due date, guys? I don't know. Let me just see. I think I should have probably, let's see. Add field, due date. No, there is no due date. I think activity date is the due date. Yeah, activity date is the due date. So it's a little bit weird the way it's defined. Activity date is the date this activity occurs. If it's in the future, it's meant to be the due date. If it's today, you're just creating a task, kind of the placeholder for this activity. Yes, Christian confirms. Deleting an output screen. Well, some of the things you don't find out, like, for example, that you can save the flow as another type. I mean, believe it or not, I spent more than a year, 2 years maybe on flows. I did not know, somebody showed me, I did not know for the longest time that I can click this one and then copy this element right here. Is there anyone who didn't know this? I mean, it took me 2 years to find it out. All right. I mean, the schedule or the curriculum, let's say, is not set in stone. I just prepared this one actually for you so that I can give you a very good overview of, at least like a start of, all the different flow types, because it's very important. I didn't want this session to just focus on, let's say, screen flows only. Now we need to go into more detail, and probably what we're going to do next time is we're going to go into the details of gets. There are a lot of things that need to be considered, like collection variables, things like that. So in our get elements, and then updates. And then we could probably go into more detail about decision elements, things like that. So we're gonna touch on schedule triggered and platform event triggered flow type of things. These are not very, I mean, they are used, but they are not used as much as the other ones. We are going to get into those probably last week, I would think. So just let me know what kind of examples you would like to see, what you would like me to prepare. The video, I think, is almost instantly available on this SuperPeer platform. If you go back to the link for the session, it's going to be available very soon. And I'm planning also to possibly edit this a little bit and then update it, upload it to YouTube as well. Yes, I will be doing loops within 6 weeks, but before we do loops, we have to at least do next week where we talk about collection variables, gets and updates with collection variables, and then we're gonna go possibly third week, we can go into loops. Yes, loops. All right. Thank you very much. I mean, thanks for participating. I appreciate it a lot. I'm overwhelmed by the interest. Thank you so much. And it's very good to see a bunch of friends as well. I hope this was helpful, and let me know. All right. You have a great night and evening. Bye-bye. End of session.